What's going on, Packers fans? Aaron Nagler here with Andy Herman, the Don of the Pack-A-Day podcast and purveyor of fine Packers takes everywhere across the internet, especially at 2:30 a.m. when I'm trying to get home in the pouring rain in New York City, and he's sitting out there throwing out clips of how awful the Packers defense is, and I'm sitting there on a non-moving train trying to just get home and get some sleep. Andy Herman never stops producing that content. How you doing, Andy?
I've been watching Royce Newman film for the last 3 hours. How the hell do you think that I'm doing, Aaron?
How dare you? It's so funny you say that because I legit was about to tweet and then I deleted it. And then I was about to tweet again and then I deleted it. It doesn't. A, I don't want to poke the bear, but B, it's like, it's a cheap joke. But I did think a couple of times today between yourself and a couple other people throwing out clips of Royce Newman. I'm like, I really hope Royce Newman and his family aren't on Twitter today. It's just a rough going, and I'm glad you brought Royce up because not only Royce, was culpable last night, but the entire offensive line, I think, is the story of that game. Because look, we can talk about the defense, we can talk about Joe Barry and his tendencies and what have you, but there were stretches where you could point to the defense and say, all right, they're at least playing ball. Like, I get it. Like, yes, situationally, some questionable decisions, etc. But, man, on offense, between Matt LaFleur's game plan and the offensive line just being completely unable to block the Lions' front, it was a disaster of monumental proportions. And I understand that, it's never as bad, right? And then you go back and you watch this tape and you're like, it's pretty bad.
It might have been.
But it's shocking to me. I think the biggest red flag coming out of that game is, the offensive line played poorly, but this is 2 weeks in a row now where the offense just didn't show up early in the game. And I think it's a combination of the offensive line playing poorly and just Matt LaFleur not having a real good handle at what this team does well.
I don't think I've ever seen a situation where one team had 27 points and the other had 18 yards. 27 points versus 18 yards. I mean, that's a plague on both your houses. That's offense, that's defense, and we can put special teams right in there as well. They had their special brand of game. Right there up with the Mo Drayton years and the Sean Menenga years, I think, yesterday with the bad penalty, the drop punt. It's just all over the place. But we talk all the time, Aaron, about complementary football and what you need to try to do to win football games. If you can't even remotely get your offense going, and we talk about like Matt LaFleur's game plan on this one, like if your offensive line can't block in the running game and they can't block in the passing game, there's not many plays on that play sheet that look too dang sexy when you're calling plays when you can't block up the opposing team. And it is not like, oh man, they're bringing some exotic stuff and we're just like our head spinning. No. They brought 4 all day, every day. And there's a play. The Green Bay goes max protect.
Yes.
It's a 2-man route.
And the defensive tackle just completely blows it up.
It's an 8-man protection against a 4-man rush.
Yep.
And it's a 3-second sack. Like, if that can't get sorted out, if you can't get, the 4 guys blocked with 8, and by the way, the 2 guys on the route completely just, circled by like 5 defenders as well. So if there's nowhere to go anyway, but like, that's just one of those moments where you're like, this offensive line just got completely manhandled. And on the defensive front, so we can talk about the same thing, but I want really quick, you brought up like Matt LaFleur and figuring out what this team does well. I think that has to be the 1A question is, what is this team's identity on offense, defense, and just in general? And we talked about that a lot last year, but like you thought maybe they were going to be a more aggressive attacking style defense. You thought maybe they were going to lean into trying to run the football a little bit more on offense. There is no identity. And I go back to, I think Matt wants to play mismatch game every single week and find a weakness and try to attack it. That sounds cool, but like you have to have something in
You've
certain
situations. You've got to be based in your fundamentals.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And it's just they're not at all. Yeah. So I don't know what it is right now.
To me, what's frustrating is that I understand the impetus of coming out in that game and saying we want to throw it around, right? But the problem I have, and I was kind of slack-jawed at, it was like Mike McCarthy was back in town. As far as like you've got an offensive line which is go back to last year. Go back to the final game of the season. They couldn't block the front then. This is Hutchinson and company. It's like they couldn't block them then. So your plan now is to come into this game and try to throw it down the field? Like, where was the quick game? Where were, like, rollouts, something to get Jordan in the groove and just hopefully get him, out of the pocket so the defense doesn't know exactly where he's going to be again and again and again. I just didn't understand the approach at all. And look, these guys have forgotten more football than I'll ever know, so I understand there's reasoning behind it. I'd just love to know what it is because, and I know we've already had lots of debate on Twitter this afternoon regarding the run game and the fact that the Packers can't run the ball, and this is a really good run defensive front, and I agree with all of that. But there is merit to at least sticking with your running game early in this game where it helps your young quarterback. The defense can't just tee off and know, well, we can pin our ears back and get after the QB, who's stationary, by the way, and is going to be right there in the pocket, because we know we just drop a bunch of guys in coverage, we rush 4, and we have nothing to worry about when it comes to the run game. And I'd also point out, you talk about lack of complementary football. The defense was put in some tough situations, especially with that tipped interception. But that tipped interception is a perfect example of they're not honoring the run game. The linebackers literally take one step forward because they know they're not really going to run it. And even if they do, they know it's not going to be pretty effective. So he takes one step forward, step back, and tip the ball, and then you've got the complete kind of fulcrum of the game right there. That's, to me, where I think, there's an old adage I used to have when Mike was in town, but it's like, coach the team you have. Yeah. And right now it feels like Matt's trying to coach a team that the team that he wants it to be is not the team that's out on the field.
This feels like a give up on the run game sort of game. Like if it's not working and you go away from it because you're just running into a wall every single time, I get it. Like running 0 yards, negative yards, that's not doing anyone any favors either. But if you look at the tape and your only conclusion is we're just not even going to try to run the ball, like we don't see any avenue where we can gain, a handful of yards here and there. Right. Like what does that say with where you're at overall? Like you can't survive that way through the course of this season. If you're going to get beat 160 yards on the 180 yards, whatever it was on the ground every single game, if you can't stop the run and you can't run the football, this is a young team with a young quarterback and young playmakers. They're going to go through some stretches where the pass game is going to look really difficult, like it has over the last 7 of the last 8 quarters. I just don't know what you do in that situation, and I think you have to have something that you can say, all right, we know that we think in this situation we can run this and we can get 4 yards out of it, and maybe if we get something to go right, it can pop. Like you got to have something. Right. And because if you get just one dimensional, we saw what happened. And I brought up the exact same play, that little play where they do the fake handoff and it's like not even a full-fledged fake. It's just kind of a turn.
Yeah, the dagger route. Yeah. Yep.
That play's worked every single time over the past 2 years. It's like a gimme throw.
Yep.
And it's one thing to be like, well, Jordan should have got his eyes up and saw the linebacker in coverage, but like it's never been that way before. And You're almost just like getting your eyes up and ripping it because that hole is always there and you're attacking that gap. But to your point, Green Bay can't run the football, nor did they even try to run the football. So it's like a cursory, like, maybe I'll lean just in case up into the gap, and then immediately just a backpedal in the lane, tip the ball, safety makes a nice play, and it's a game-changing play. But they're not going to honor it if you're not running.
Well, and then so we're talking clearly offensive line is overmatched, right? What's so frustrating, I think, for a lot of fans is then you fast forward to the second half and they do a better job. I'm not saying they vastly improved, but they do a better job. They start moving the ball. The problem is you're doing that against a defense which is completely different as far as what they're trying to accomplish. Because in the first half, they're getting after the QB very aggressively. In the second half, I'm not saying they're playing off or they're playing back. They're still playing hard. Like, I do think the Packers had much better execution. But they're just making sure that we're not going to get beat deep over the top. We are going to make sure that we rally and tackle. And they were called for a few penalties, but man, that's a defense that is physical as hell. And they made the Packers earn every bit of it. You turn around, you look at the Packers defense, misgivings about Joe Barry aside. The talk about the scheme, whatever it is, that's the scheme. I understand it. But man, the stark difference in attitude, physicality, ability to get the ball carrier on the ground between these two defenses is night and day. I don't think you could draw up more of a difference between just the attitude of these two defenses on display last night.
Yeah, I mean, Matt always says, if you're going to lose fast. This is not a fast attacking defense. This is not a defense that's playing with a level of confidence. I thought the first a couple drives. I know that you had the 2 plays against Razul on that second drive.
Right.
On the third down, you had Laporta come open. Razul has okay coverage on it.
He has decent coverage there. Yeah.
Decent coverage. It's a nice throw. It's a nice catch. It happens, whatever. And then I don't know if you saw the tweet from Ryan Wood of what that they caught.
They drew up that first touchdown specifically to bait Rasul. I mean, that's good coaching.
Yep, it is. And
right
like, it's just a cool dynamic of like Razul saw something on tape over and over and over from the Lions, exploited it last year, got a pass, like I think it was a pass breakup or whatever it was on it. And then the Lions go and say, oh, he knows that we're going to do this. So now we're going to use that against him, and they get an awesome touchdown off of it. But like, I thought like the first couple drives outside of those 2 plays was like, you saw some of it. And then like the game went on again, the defense was put in some poor positions, whatever. But this is not specific to just this game. And if it were, you have a lot more accident forgiveness with, and you're like, okay, like, all right, the Lions got the best of you, learn from it. It's a young team. We'll go on to next week. But we saw this for 3 quarters against the Saints. We saw it in the 4th quarter against Atlanta. We've seen it for a couple of years now at times, a lot of the same stuff. So that's the thing that's, I think, more concerning is there's always that hope when you start a new season and you're going to maybe do some things differently that it's going to look differently. It hasn't looked differently.
No, and that you heard Matt after the game. Talking
Big
about,
time.
We're doing the same things. We're getting manhandled. Something's got to change. Well, you're the guy in charge. And you brought back the guy responsible for making it look however it's supposed to look. Different, the same, what have you. So I know Matt keeps talking about things needing to change, but nothing has changed. And I'm fascinated now that they've got a bit of a mini bye, right? They've got a stretch here where if you're going to implement changes, it's a pretty good week to do it. Yeah. I mean, I don't think you wait until the bye week, right? The other thing that this is – so that's schematic, right? And or kind of emphasis. What I worry about, my biggest kind of takeaway from that game defensively, forget the schematic stuff. The yards after contact for Detroit were alarming. Like, and I put this out there on Twitter earlier, and people are like, oh, well, their backs run hard. It's like, not just the backs. I'm talking tight ends. I'm talking receivers. Anybody with a football yesterday. When they were initially hit by a Green Bay Packers defender, almost every single time, not every time, but almost every single time, what should have been a 1 or 2 yard gain or a 3 or 4 yard gain ended up as a 5 or 6 yard gain or a 8 or 9 yard gain. That's just living. If you're the offense, you're continually ahead of the sticks. And as a play caller, Ben Johnson can sit there and go, I'm living in second and short. I can legit call whatever I want at any time. The defense has to keep everything like open. There's no ability to kind of key on anything because anything could be coming at you. So I don't know how you change that. I don't know what the recipe is to suddenly have guys who get dudes on the ground, because yesterday it just looked like Detroit was the more physical team, both sides of the ball. But on defense, guys are in position to make plays, and Detroit ball carriers are just dragging them. That's frustrating.
I mean, who are your intimidators on defense? Who is it that is making the big physical hits? And we saw Quay with a couple of big physical hits, like in the passing game, but we also saw him get dragged on a few different occasions. You've got Rashawn, who's, a physically intimidating player, and he's going to throw your quarterback to the ground and maybe sometimes knock him out of the game, like we saw against the Saints. Right now, we can only play like 20 snaps a game. Kenny can be a little bit of an intimidator, but it's tough for the guy that's double teamed in the middle of the defensive line to be your big
60
time
60 snaps a game.
60 snaps. It's tough for that guy to consistently be your intimidator.
Right.
Rudy Ford can lay a hit, but he isn't fleet-footed
when he's in the right position. Yeah.
His position to actually be able to make the big physical hit.
Right.
So like, you don't have those guys. McDuffie's undersized. Quay's a little bit undersized. Jair, Eric Stokes, not intimidating players. Savage, not an he's been playing faster, but not your we can go through this. Enagbari and over and over and over. Your Woodens and your Brookses are your undersized gap shooting sort of guys. And you can get by with some of that, especially if you play fast, play intense, have great attention to detail, and are playing together as a team. We haven't necessarily seen that either. And it just goes back to what we talked about at the beginning is identity. Is it, what do you want to be? And this team doesn't have anything that they can, hold their hat on and say like, this is who we are. This is what we're going to be. It's another thing too. I talked about this a little bit with Mike Wall today for Saturday's podcast, but it's one thing if this defense said, you know what, we're going to be more of a finesse defense. We understand that, but we're going to be a kick-ass pass defense. But if you told me right now that like game is on the line and you're going against a decent offense and you got to get off the field, go back to the Saints game. The defense played well in that Saints game overall, But Jameis Winston's at quarterback. Green Bay just gets the lead. You know they have to pass. You can't let them get in field goal range. And the Saints drive right down the field for a 45-ish yard field goal attempt for the win.
Yep.
I still don't feel necessary. And I know Jair's out. We can caveat freaking everything to death. But at the end of the day, I don't feel even great about any one thing that they can specifically do that I'm like, yep, if we get in this situation, we're going to be really good at it.
Right. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Quay because obviously he's a talking point today due to the penalty on special teams, which is crazy to me because if you look earlier in the game, McDuffie's the one who's playing that position on field goal block. And then all of a sudden, you get this big, humongous, momentum-shifting stop, and then he's out there on field goal block, which again, I don't understand it. But, man, it really sucks that moment really kind of took the air out of the game, pretty much sealed it. It was essentially over at that point, I would say, after they scored that touchdown. And it really kind of almost obliterates what a good day he had. I thought he had a really good game. Yeah, there were moments, obviously, like you point out, where he got dragged a couple times, no doubt about it. But overall, he played a really good game. I think, what did he end up with, 19 tackles or something like that?
He was all over the place.
He was all over the field and mostly arriving and putting dudes on the ground and doing a really good job. And then that one mistake lives in people's minds because it's so costly. Look, I'm not sitting here asking how they live with him because I know how they live with him. But at what point does Matt LaFleur, like, maybe not sit him down, but, like, have to have, like, any kind of intervention here as far as, man, you can't keep costing your team again and again and again because that's there. That happened. You know, you can't deny it. Like, it's easier for me to excuse some of the both of the things that happened last year as heat of the moment, brushing a guy off. Like, that happens. That's human, right? Like, this is, like, you got to know the rules, man. Which I know he said afterwards that he does. Like that, it's hard. That's a hard it's a hard one to live with.
And I think so a couple things there. And I wasn't aware that he said after that he did know the rules. So then obviously that's a different degree of, all right, then really what are we doing here?
Right.
But the other thing too is that I can understand it's a 10-point game at that point. They're kicking the field goal to go up to 13. There's not much time left. So maybe you're thinking you get a field goal block, you can keep it at 10, or maybe you can get a field goal block and generate a big play. At that point, you're just sort of like, if you even get a running into the kicker, if you get anything, like if it's going to be,
you've made the stop, take the win.
Take the win. And why even rush there's so many more bad things that can happen by even going field goal block in that situation.
Totally agree.
And it's freaking Dan Campbell. I wouldn't be surprised if he freaking fakes that thing anyway.
I literally said that on Watch Party. I'm like, because Corey was like, they can't believe they're kicking the field goal. I was like, it's Dan Campbell.
Maybe you won't.
Could totally be a fake. Like, it wouldn't surprise me.
If you get like some small thing that's like a half the distance to the goal and it's not a first down, he's going to go for it. So like, just play back. Don't even rush on that play.
Right.
Put your cursory pressure off the edge, but make sure he doesn't, like, whatever you need to do, but just get off the field. Let your offense still has momentum in that game. You're down 2 scores. There's just so many things that we can, and that's the frustrating thing is, it's the player, but also put your guys in positions to be successful and not make mistakes like that.
That's a great segue to Rich Bisaccia, who obviously was promoted this offseason, is now assistant head coach, and he is still in charge, obviously, of the special teams, which have, I think, by all accounts, gotten worse. I mean, I don't think you can, come away from these last 4 games, the first 4 games of the season, and not notice a bit of slippage here. And I understand the aggressiveness, wanting to make a play, and we've talked a lot about that as far as, Bisaccia wanting guys to really own special teams, right, and trying to instill a mentality. But when you're continually taking it out of the end zone and putting your offense in bad field position and having these insanely costly penalties, whether it is Quay Walker, which gets all the kind of headlines today, but they had the one decent return they had that called back because of a really stupid holding call or a holding penalty. It's like, at what point, Bisaccia, this is your house, man. You got to clean this up. I can't. It's like, is it at the water in Green Bay? How is it so difficult to get competent special teams? It's blowing my mind.
One thing I want to go back to last year is that even with Keyshawn being amazing with some of the returns that he was doing, that was mostly ranked as like the 26th, 27th best special teams in the NFL last year by whatever metric. There's the special teams rankings, there's PFF, whatever you want to go by,
DVOA,
but like
all of it. Yep.
All of it. It just was not considered overall a really good special teams. And what I always kind of pointed to is they sort of stumbled upon Keyshawn and it worked out.
And it worked
because
well.
Listen, that same special teams coach, that same special teams group, everything had Keyshawn blocking for Amari Rodgers for the first half of that season before finally jettisoning. I think it was just Brian's call to say we're done with Amari, and then they had to do something else, and then just kind of being like, oh, I guess Keyshawn Nixon, and then he just goes out and tears it up. That covered. There were some blocked punts during that season. There were some real ugly special teams during the course of that year that got covered up by Keyshawn Nixon just kind of going out and having a handful of just ridiculous, amazing plays. Right. And then you come back this year, you're not getting those ridiculous, amazing plays from Keyshawn, and it looks a lot like it did last year. And now there's not those big positives to sort of counteract it. So I have not, and I understood last year with Bisaccia that it was going to take a time to go from a special teams that's been abysmal for I don't even know how long, and to try to switch that mindset. But you got additional special teams coaches. You got the assistant head coaching gig. Like you got probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest special teams coach contract in the NFL. You got everything.
Oh, and not to mention your general manager basically went to you a number of times and asked, what about this guy? What about this guy? We've signed how many dudes this offseason with the particular bend towards, we're going to sign them for special teams.
Yep. Like that you've got Rudy Fords, you've got, and I know they have to play on defense too, but Nixon, you've got like so many, like Ennis Gaines when he's called up is just for special teams. Like there are a lot of guys on this team that are set up to basically be special teams guys. So for it to be that ugly at times, the big punt return for the touchdown last week, it's not good enough. And it feels like it's like the third biggest issue in this game besides defense and offense. But again, a plague on everyone's house after this one. It was ugly all the way around.
Yeah, it absolutely was. So looking ahead, they've got this mini bye, right? And I do think obviously the break is always welcome, but it comes at a good time. Vegas, clearly not a great team, but man, the Packers have every ability to go out there and lose this game. Like they are a quintessential week-to-week team. All I ask and all I think they have to focus on is getting out the gate. Like they cannot continue to come out on these games and just lay eggs initially on offense. Like whatever happens in this game, they've got to start faster in offense. That's got to be the number one priority.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's hard because they looked great on offense against the Falcons for the first two quarters, and then they laid the egg in the fourth quarter, and that stings really, as well. So it's like it's putting together those 4-quarter games. But what I want to see ultimately is competitive football, and not just like in spurts. Like I want to see it throughout the course of the game. And there's going to be a 3 and out here and there. Totally understand it. You can't go 3 plays 0 yards, 3 plays -11, 3 plays 7, 1 play interception, 3 plays 3 yards. We have a 13 play -1 yard. Through 5 series, whatever it is.
I mean, at the end of the first half, they had 3 first downs. 2 of them came via penalty.
Yeah. Like that can't happen. That's so it just needs to be a bit more consistent. I'm not expecting, Super Bowl contending team, but I want to see competitive play throughout the course of the game. And 7 of the last 8 quarters ish, or whatever it is, 9 quarters, just nowhere near good enough for Green Bay.
We'll see what happens with like I said, a little bit of a break. A little regroup. Who knows? Maybe there's some changes along the offensive line, though I don't think they have a ton of options there. We will see.
Elton could be back by Vegas. Maybe.
I doubt. I'm glad you brought that up because I think there's an outside chance. But don't you? If I'm the the Packers, they're probably going to wait. We got the bye right after that. Like they'll probably try and live with it for one more week. That would be my guess. But we'll see. But maybe he's out there. Who knows? We'll see. I just want you to note that I didn't say one time, not a word, uttered about Aaron Jones and his usage or lack thereof. Thank you. I'm improving, Andy. I'm growing.
So should I say you didn't get the ball until they were down 24-3? Because that seems like it is something that you.
Hey man, I don't know. The Aaron Jones thing, it forever mystifies me. I understand that he's on a pitch count.
I'm glad I could get it out of you.
I understand it. I get it. But also at the same time, then why the fuck is he suited up?
Yeah, don't don't have it both ways. So just don't decoy him. Like if you're going to use him, use him. If he only has 10 snaps, like don't have him come when you're down 24-3. At that point, they're useless. Like, and if the idea is, well, we're not just going to run them into Detroit's wall of a defense. You find a different way.
There's a million different ways you can get him the ball.
You ran a screen pass, jump pass, screen pass in week 1. Find a way to get him the damn football.
I couldn't agree more. See, I got you to do it. I didn't have to do it. All right, there you go. I love it. Andy, have a good mini break here this weekend and into next week. I know you'll be churning out all the content, Pack a Day, and everything else on your YouTube channel. Thank you so much, Andy.
Appreciate it, Aaron.